You're watching TelecomTV's exclusive video coverage of the first ever OPNFV Summit from here in San Francisco. And I'm joined now by three distinguished colleagues, and we are going to debate getting real, taking OpenNFV from the labs to implementation. And if I can just introduce my three guests. On my far right, we have Trevor Cooper, who is Solutions Architect with Communications Infrastructure Business at Intel. Next to Trevor is Margaret Chiosi, who is a Distinguished Network Architect at AT&T. And between Margaret and myself is Wenjing, Distinguished Technologist at Dell Research. Thank you all for joining me today. Can we start by looking at what do we mean by open? We talk about OpenNFV, but in the context of NFV, what do we mean by open? Wenjing, perhaps we can start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So let's start with something simple. First thing, I think open, to build a system, a networking system, traditionally we do it with very handcrafted, vertically integrated systems. And so move that from this hardware delivery to a common standard computing platform plus a virtualization software on top of it, and that's a very big change. So that's first level of openness. And also we would like to see openness in in the concept of interfaces and APIs, and they allow the ecosystem to compose the best components together and innovate. So that's the second level of openness. And I can definitely see while we're here, there's open source, right? So I will start from there. I think those are good ones to look at.
And Margaret, what about AT&T's perspective on what open really means here?
Well, I mean, the same. There's two areas. There's an open API, you have a common framework, and you have all these functional blocks, and you have an open API or open interfaces. So as those functional blocks go from proprietary to open source, you're not rearranging the whole framework. So we see it both ways, open APIs, whether it's standards-based or source-based, and then of course open source.
And Trevor, same for you?
I think for me, open means solving industry problems as a community rather than trying to go it alone. And in the context of NFV, there are problems we all need to solve where we can all benefit. I also think it means a philosophy, a way of thinking in terms of how we develop products. And I think it means contributing is really the only way to truly benefit from the open environment.
Trevor, if I can stay with Intel, what are you seeing so far with early proofs of concept work with OpenNFV?
Well, I think you can think of the OPNFV as a proof of concept. It's a reference that we're developing. And if you think about it, we started just over a year ago with really nothing, and we took existing open source ingredients and we really integrated them, and we built lab infrastructures, and so we really have done it. We've taken these components, we've integrated them, deployed them, tested them in a very practical way, and it's an evolution, but for me, I think of it as an evolving proof of concept where we're proving out in a very practical way where the gaps are in the various open source ingredients, as well as what we need around the platform to develop a truly repeatable, performant NFV platform.
I would actually sort of tweak it. It's a little bit more than a POC. It's really an incubation environment, because our goal is not just to prove or not just to prove a certain concept. It's truly to incubate a design, and then once it's proven, then we basically focus and say, okay, this is the path we go. So it's slightly different.
Wenjing?
Yeah, we've tried several different flavors of POC. So some of them we focus on very hard technical problem. So for instance, we work with Intel on data path performance, right? And how far you can push towards. And those learnings, I think, will help us to also design the next generation of hardware a lot better. And the second level of POC is really how do you put all these together? So we pick a customer use case. We have mobile networks, for example, which areas make sense and where the returns are going to come from, and whether you could actually put 3, 4, 5 vendors, software and hardware together and make a reliable and dependable platform. And so I think both are very valuable.
Where are we so far? I mean, are we talking about just 1 or 2 companies working together on these proofs of concept? You're talking about getting, 4 or 5 different vendors on the same platform here. Are we still on small scale proofs of concept?
We've done one that's actually the first POC we put together under SC. And in that case, it's actually end-to-end. You really have hardware components like NIC cards, adapters, accelerators, right? And computing platforms. And on top of that, different middle layer software and application software and plus the management orchestration. So it's actually very complex, this system. I think those are important to identify where the friction is going to be, and so help us guide design better.
And Margaret, you mentioned creating this incubator culture. What do you need to do that? What do we as a group need to do to achieve that?
Well, participation, right? The broader the participation, the more ideas, things like that. So I would say, at least in the OPNFV community, there's sort of 2 types of folks that are needed. You have one group that understands the use cases. So we can come up as an industry of users, come up with common use cases, whether it's data plane acceleration, types of traffic profiles and benchmarks, or it's the use case of instantiation life cycle of an application. That will help drive the platform. And in some sense, as we start incubating different types of ideas, whether it's from data plane acceleration or automation of this whole orchestration and life cycle, hopefully we can then repeatedly test it with these common test profiles and use cases to just and be able to compare. Are we improving? Are we making it worse? That type of thing.
Trevor, Intel is another company that encourages a lot of partnerships and incubation and supports like ecosystems. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that all these different players are working in the same direction, that fully understand things, or is it still an education element to get everyone on board and go in the same direction?
I think we all are still learning to some extent as an industry. We're on this journey together. But I think we've made huge progress. I think that we've really proved what's possible. So a few years ago, I think there was a lot of doubt about that. But the proof of that, I think, is that everybody's on board. So from the service providers to the various vendors, hardware, software vendors, and that's evidenced by the attendance at this event and the kind of momentum that we've been able to achieve. But I think we do still have a lot to learn, and we're really at the point where we've able to integrate the various components and show, as I said, what's possible, and now we've got to contextualize that with the orchestration and the management systems to be able to automate provision and show that we can do that in a really commercial way.
So picking up on that last note, where are we on that side? Where are we in terms of the management and orchestration of services? What stage are we at? Wenjing?
Yes. So as we alluded to earlier, once you open up, it does bring the complexity of how do you put these together and in a coherent fashion. So management orchestration, all that's very important. And based on the customers that we've been talking to, or who are actually going beyond a lab trial or proof of concept to actually deployment, I think they would go identify a particular use case, and maybe in that particular case, the management is a commercial version of a management interface specifically for that particular use case. Now that may not be ideal in the long run, but I think it is where we are able to actually control all those loose ends and make the service perform a lot better. So it's going to be, I think, evolutionary, but I think we are well underway to go do that. There are a lot of use cases I think is ready for commercial.
Margaret, this might be an odd question, but are we going too fast at times? Because this is a very young part of the telecoms industry. It's only a few years since we've started this. This is the first OPNFE summit. Is it the case that we might be pushing things a little too fast, and maybe some of these trials or some of these deployments we're seeing might be a bit of a hybrid of open and proprietary approaches?
Well, you want to go best in breed, you want to go fast, and so since not everything's open or open source, you sort of are stuck, if I call it that, with this hybrid. That's why it's important to have this open framework. But no, I don't think we're going too fast. In fact, I don't think we're going fast enough. Because if you look at all the different carriers, because we don't have one open framework, and in some sense a clear path of solving, whether it's our data planning acceleration or this whole automation of our life cycle of management of virtual functions, you've got vendors all over the place that are filling in the gaps with proprietary stuff, coming up with their own frameworks. You've got carriers coming up with their own framework. I mean, AT&T's building our Domain 2.0 platform, and because there isn't open common agreement, we're sort of stuck of just creating our own. So the sooner or the quicker the industry converges on the open framework and the common pieces and so forth, then I think the faster the industry as a whole will sort of get over the hump and actually start executing and getting back to their core competency. So the carrier's core competencies is creating new services. The Dell core competencies are creating platforms. And the Intel core competency is, creating the chips and the environment so that, you can support all this stuff. But instead, we're all now trying to figure out how do we do common stuff. So we're all pulled out of, we're spending less time on our core competency because we also have to do this infrastructure piece. Yeah, I don't think we're moving fast enough.
So Trevor, we're racing against the clock here to get over this speed hump, if you like, and get on with what we do best.
Yes, I agree with that. I think Margaret said it very well, that we all have to work on the problems together. I think one of the things I've really learned is it's not just about the platform. It's about all the tooling, the processes, the environment you need around that to be able to develop and integrate and deploy an NFV platform that is repeatable and performant and all those things you really need.
And I'll add to that we have a very common understanding of the needs. And you can see there's the gaps that need to fill. Right? And so OPNFV, I think, as a community, is in really the best position to fill that gap and fulfill, I think, the industry need overall. So I agree that we need to speed up rather than hesitate in this critical juncture.
So coming back to the subject of our little discussion here is getting real from the labs to commercial implementation. How far away are we, do we think, from a wide-scale take-up? Margaret, do you want to sort of hazard a guess of where the industry as a whole might be? How long before we start to see critical mass, if you like?
Well, I would say AT&T has hit critical mass within our company because we have a direction of moving our network, a targeted set of network, onto our SDN-enabled cloud, and we have specific goals. So by 2020, our goal is to have 75%. So right there, that's critical mass. And so we're on target for 5% at the end of this year. And when I was involved in the beginning of our Domain 2 front door, if I call it that, I mean, we reviewed like 50 projects. I mean, they're way over 50 now. So we, within AT&T, have critical mass. The industry is starting to rally around, very similar like AT&T, of having targets, setting milestones to say, we will do X by this date. See, before it was like a lot of lab stuff, trying things, trying to get corporate buy-in and so forth. But I think, to be sort of bold, I would say, with AT&T, from our CEO down, announcing our commitment to an SDN-enabled cloud and our whole Domain 2, and literally putting out key measurable milestones, got the rest of the industry to sort of wake up and go, wait a minute, you know? And so now we're seeing a lot of our peers, the carriers, the other carriers, getting more and more committed, big time. So, so that's good. It's good. So I think, I mean, it sort of started already this year, but next year, big time. I see, based on what all the carriers are doing, big time next year.
Wenjing, do you think next year is the big time as well?
Yeah, I think so. Again, you know, NFV is not one particular application. There's a lot of them. Telecommunication systems are complicated. There's a lot of different use cases for it. A lot of them are probably very mature for commercial use now. And, but the critical mass is very important. That really, when we see the AT&T announcement and you know, hard target on it, that shows the whole industry. So we definitely see that, and it's even spilled out to other adjacent industries too. So enterprises, for example, are interested in this as well.
And Trevor, do you see the large telcos putting down markers as being really beneficial here, and it kind of hardens what we need to do and gets our focus as to where to go next?
Well, I think it does. I think it hardens our commitment, and I think Intel has definitely achieved critical mass in terms of investment to make sure that our customers can achieve those goals that they've set. And from the projects I've been exposed to with telcos and other customers, I think next year is going to be a huge year for this industry to really show real stuff in terms of pilots and leading on to deployments. So it should be an exciting year.
Let's hope we'll reconvene at this time next year and see what progress we've made. But for the time being, Trevor, Margaret, Wenjing, thank you all very much for joining us on TelecomTV.
Thank you.